co-sponsors for tonight's community conversation. In addition to Mayor Fern and Representative Roeder, the Melrose Alliance Against Violence, MAID, and we're going to be hearing from Rebecca Mooney, the Executive Director of MAID, in a little while. Also the Stoneham Alliance Against Violence, the Wakefield Alliance Against Violence, and the Winchester Coalition for a Safer Community. So thank you very much, not just for co-sponsoring this conversation and being here, but for the very important work that you all do in our communities every day. We really, really appreciate it. As you are, I'm sure, aware, our topics tonight really revolve around the issues of education, prevention, and survivor support strategies around the issues of domestic violence, sexual assault, and specifically teen dating violence. We know that these are often very difficult conversations to have, especially for the members of our community who have been directly affected by violence. But it's my belief, and I think shared by others, that it is very important that we talk about these issues, that we bring them out of the shadows, and that we have discussion. And we support each other, we learn from each other, and we talk about strategies to prevent violence in our families and in our communities. There are index cards available. Was that right, Tom? And so if you have a question or a comment or feedback and you'd rather share it confidentially, feel free to write that on an index card and we will take those. If you're comfortable just sharing feedback or asking questions directly, you can do that as well. So what we're going to do in terms of tonight's program, Mayor Inferno will say a few words of welcome. Then Kelly Dwyer is going to essentially give a brief keynote address, and I'll introduce Kelly in a moment before she speaks. And then we have an amazing panel tonight with Rebecca Mooney, Dr. Malcolm Ashley, and Mark Bergeron-Neighbor. And I'll introduce each of them before they say a few words. But again, we're going to keep the speaking program fairly brief so that we can make tonight as interactive as possible. So without further ado, again, thank you for joining us. I should also mention that the conversation is being live streamed on Facebook, and so it will be recorded. We will send the link to the recording. So if you would like to share this with others, in your organizations or other friends, family, whatever, you'll be able to do so if they weren't able to join us tonight. All right, and if you please make sure if you want to receive the link to the recording that you signed in when you came in. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mayor of Melrose, Mayor Dale.
Thank you very much, Senator Lewis, and thank you also for bringing this topic here to Melrose. I do want to welcome you all to Melrose. It's a cold night, so thank you for coming out. I've been in total denial of winter, but I think it's time to get out the gloves and scarves, so welcome this evening. I also want to thank our keynote speaker, Kelly Dwyer, for taking time out of her busy schedule, as well as our other panelists this evening. Thank you. Teen dating, violence, and sexual assault has no boundaries. It can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter your socioeconomics at all. The more we know about it, the more we can work together and make this a thing of the past. So I think with our informative panel here tonight, this will be a very informative evening for everyone. I do want to just welcome you again. And I also want to hats off to Mayor Christensen for coming here, my hometown mayor, so thank you very much. And at this time, I'd like to introduce, probably doesn't need any introduction, but our state representative, Paul Berman.
Thank you all so much for being here. Gail mentioned the winter coming, and I suspect Mayor Christensen can tell you that winter for a mayor is a lot different than winter for everyone else. Thank you all for coming, and thanks in particular to the Board of Trustees of Memorial Hall, because they've occasion we donate space when someone presents a worthy cause or an opportunity to educate the community. And this is a very complicated subject. And Senator Lewis and I come from it, I think, from a particular perspective, and that we are both the fathers of teenage kids. Senator's two daughters, I have two sons, and it is so important to cover the entire spectrum. And what I think about a lot is prevention. And there's a million ways to think about that. But what you all do is make it through your local efforts. You make it part of the culture of the community to talk about dating violence, to combat what kids are up against today in terms of social media and broadcast media, all the influences that come at you from all sides. You really need you need a touchstone. You need a place to go and realize here's what really works. Here's how I should really behave. Certainly, it starts hopefully in the home. Mom and dad are good role models, but it's also you all in your expertise and your caring and your commitment really at the grassroots level to really kind of to turn the tide, to change the culture and give kids a shot to make the right decisions. So thank you very much. Thank you to the panel for all that you do, devoting your careers to this. It's God's work, and we very much, again, Steve's parent, I really appreciate what you do every day to make this thing a pass. So without much further ado, Senator Lewis, thank you very much for bringing this to Melrose. We look forward to the presentation.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Kroger, and thank you, Mary Inferno. All right, so it's now my privilege to introduce Kelly Dwyer. Earlier this year, back in February, Governor Baker appointed Kelly to head up the Governor's Council on Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence. Kelly began her career at the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office as a victim witness advocate and providing services through the Old Colony YMCA for girls and young women committed to the Department of Youth Services. She has also held various leadership roles in the Army National Guard. Kelly's experience includes direct victim advocacy and support work, building coalitions, advancing policy, education, and sharing her experiences with others. Please join me in welcoming to Melrose and to our community conversation tonight, Kelly Dwyer.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Thank you and good evening, and thank you for having me here today to speak on such an important topic. The issues of sexual assault and domestic violence are a priority of the Baker-Polito administration, and I'm pleased to be here to discuss a cause that the administration cares so deeply about, and that the Lieutenant Governor has been championing it since the administration took office, and some of the work we've been doing to combat the issues. Today, more and more survivors are empowered to speak up, and we are striving to make the necessary resources available to them. The Governor's Council to address sexual assault and domestic violence works to enhance those resources and share them with the people of the Commonwealth to improve prevention and strengthen support systems. I've been asked to share with you the important work of our council and its workers, and share how this work is informing how the Commonwealth identifies in response to sexual assault and domestic violence. Although some of the work I will be discussing today doesn't seem like it is directly impacting or specific to teen dating violence, the experts that participate in the council do bring that lens to ensure that our work always incorporates that perspective. In April of 2015, Governor Baker signed Executive Order 563 creating the Governor's Council to address sexual assault and domestic violence, and appointing Lieutenant Governor Polito as chair. The mission of the council is to advise the governor on how to help individuals, children, and family of the Commonwealth to live a life free of sexual assault and domestic violence. This advisory council, previously structured under the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, was elevated to the governor's office for the first time and includes 30 members that recommendations in August of 2017, which created our 2018 action plan. The 5 work groups are military veterans and families, housing stability and self-sufficiency, assessment and response, prevention and education, and child trafficking. It has been incredible to see the work come to fruition out of each of these work groups throughout this year, especially when collaborative efforts build upon sustainability at the programmatic level. Although this is just scratching the surface of the work that has been done, or is being done, both within and outside of the council, I wanted to share some highlights with you all here tonight. The assessment and response work group's mission is to develop recommendations that improve the Commonwealth's identification and response to domestic violence high-risk cases. The group has worked hard and has spent time reviewing risk assessment tools used across the country and here in Massachusetts. The tools are used by many different disciplines, including police, probation, advocates, and in high-risk settings. Some of those tools are focused on lethality, high-risk, or reassault. Out of the many conversations and solution seeking, the assessment and response work group developed an important tool to assist law enforcement in gathering information about history, risk, and reassault indicators in each case, a domestic violence assessment worksheet. This worksheet not only assists police officers in gathering information about domestic violence history, risk, and reassault, but it also fosters collaboration between police departments, DA's office, and community-based domestic violence organizations, informs and connects victims with resources, and supports determining bail, dangerousness hearings, probation, and parole. This worksheet has been implemented within the Municipal Police Training Committee and was piloted by Greenfield, Foxborough, Quincy, and Newburgh. The group utilized phase 1 of the pilot to identify opportunities for improvement of the toolkit, use that information, and adjust it accordingly. It was great to hear many of the success stories from each of the groups on how the assessment sheet made a positive impact on both the service providers and the victims they interacted with. Those examples show that when there is a coordinated response designed to better support victims, it can be immensely impactful. It can also support efforts in understanding and identifying the way trauma impacts individuals in different ways. The assessment and response work group received feedback from our 4 regional pilot sites. Some of that feedback included initial introductions for all the agencies involved, developing recommended responsibilities or memorandums of understanding for partnering agencies, in maintaining communication with the work group in case any questions arise. The work group was able to put some great minds together in order to complete or compile a toolkit to pair with the domestic violence assessment worksheet, which includes samples of recommended MOUs, recommended roles and responsibilities, recommended policies and procedures, the assessment worksheet, and the strangulation worksheet. The group also recommended focusing on slowly rolling it out and introducing it to all towns that have civilian police advocates to help facilitate collaborative efforts amongst the agencies. We are currently in that process. I also wanted to touch briefly upon the work of the prevention education work group. Mark is actually here today as part of the panel, and he co-chairs that particular work group, so I won't go into too much detail about it. The mission of the prevention education work group is to provide recommendations to the administration on how to build a program focused on promoting healthy relationships through education and through the prevention of harassment, stalking, dating, and sexual violence for Massachusetts youth, starting in pre-kindergarten and continuing through college. With the goal of creating a skills chart, the group set out to compile and review existing research and resources, both nationwide and here in Massachusetts, in order to create a skills chart which would be available to support prevention and education efforts across educational sectors. Although the document is not yet finalized, the goal of the chart is to be accessible to administrators and educators to support and assist in understanding what skills can and should be taught at the student's grade level in order to address sexual assault and domestic violence in ways that are supported by educational standards and principles. The group continues to pay particular focus to ensure that recommended skills in the chart are age appropriate and built upon skills of prior grade levels. Additionally, the work group consists of a variety of professionals throughout Massachusetts, such as educators, school administrators, sexual assault and domestic violence, nonprofit organizations, and survivors. Additionally, this skills chart can potentially assist in building community collaborations amongst educators and those working in the sexual assault and domestic violence nonprofit organizations to build upon prevention and intervention efforts with youth across the Commonwealth. Lastly, I want spring and summer, the Lieutenant Governor and I spent time traveling to different regions of the Commonwealth, having community impact discussions with content experts focused on prevention efforts in their communities and more broadly across the Commonwealth. From those conversations, we acknowledge that prevention doesn't happen in a singular approach, but happens through multi-strategic approaches determined by a comprehensive, multidisciplinary system, team-based on the community needs with consistent and continual efforts to end sexual assault and domestic violence. It became clear from those conversations that a public awareness campaign would play a significant role in a larger multidisciplinary approach focused on changing the ideas around sexual assault and domestic violence. It was also expressed that in order for the campaign to be effective in creating a lasting impact, it would also need to focus on the root causes of sexual assault and domestic violence, while also reaching a younger audience. So we formed and have been meeting with a newly assembled working group within the council to work with a selected vendor to help narrow the scope of the public awareness campaign, identify audiences, and create a message that would resonate and create a lasting impact. Currently, more advertising, the selected vendor is in their research phase, and our anticipated kickoff of the campaign is in 2019. As we work towards more solutions, more tools, and more ways to help victims and survivors prevent sexual assault and domestic violence, I challenge you today to think about what you will do to help that cause. Bring the message and the conversation out of this room and into your communities, and let's continue to strive to end sexual assault and domestic violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and appreciate so much your words tonight and the work that you and the Lieutenant Governor and the Council are doing on behalf of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And as the Senate Chair of the Public Health Committee, I, along with my co-chair, Representative Hogan, convened the hearing that Kelly referred to, and really trying to have the conversation around domestic violence and sexual assault as a public health issue, as a public health epidemic, and that's really the way we should be thinking about it, and the strategies that can be effective in preventing it as we do other public health issues. And I'm very pleased that one tangible thing that came out of that hearing was the proposal to develop a public awareness campaign, and I'm pleased to be part of this working group. And it was news to me when we met the first time that the last time that Massachusetts had done such a public awareness campaign was more than 2 decades. So it's really long overdue, and we know there's so much education that's needed here for teens, parents, and really all community members. So anybody who has a particular interest in this and has ideas around what you would hope to see in a public awareness campaign, the campaign is in its early development stage right now. So feel free to share with me or with almost all our panelists who are serving on that working group as well. So to share with us if you do have particular thoughts about this, because it is a terrific opportunity really to develop a campaign that will be hopefully seen by millions of people, particularly teenagers in Massachusetts. So it's an opportunity we want to really take good advantage of. And I want to thank Representative Broder and my colleagues in the legislature for providing the funding for this campaign. So next up, we're going to be hearing from Rebecca Mooney. I'm sure many in the room know Rebecca already. Rebecca has a master's degree in education from Lesley University and has worked in the field of prevention as a counselor and a nonprofit manager for over 30 years, serving as the executive director of the Melrose Alliance Against Violence, MAVE, for 21 years. During her tenure, Rebecca has spearheaded a range of violence prevention programs here in the Melrose schools and the community, including bullying prevention, domestic and teen dating violence prevention, mentoring programs, peer mediation, and peer leadership programs. In 2013, Rebecca had the honor of speaking at the White House as part of Teen Dating Violence Prevention Month. And it's no accident that we're holding this community conversation in Melrose tonight. It's really because of Rebecca and the incredible work that MAVE does that we thought it was appropriate to partner and to have the conversation here tonight. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rebecca Mooney.
So I didn't really prepare remarks, but I just classroom once. I can't afford to do more than that. I'm spread so thin. We get to work with students, elementary school, middle school, high school. We get to really know them and form relationships with them. So that's a luxury, I feel, that we're lucky to have. But our whole approach is that domestic violence, teen dating violence is a really difficult issue. If it was easy to solve, we wouldn't be here tonight. It's a tricky, difficult situation with no easy answers. And so it really takes working on all fronts simultaneously to make any headway. So everything we do, we think of in terms of it being community-wide. We work with the police, and I want to introduce in the back Detective Dan Ellers. He is the domestic violence officer. We work very closely with Detective Ellers, and he serves on our board of directors as well. We work really closely with the Melrose Public Schools, with the health department, the hospital, the business community, parents, students. Again, whenever we are developing a new initiative, we think, how can we make this community-wide? Clergy, because we just believe that all of us have a role to play, and you never know who that person might be who hears something or that someone confides in. And so all of us need to be trained on this issue and to know what resources are there for help. I would say the original mission of our organization was to help victims of domestic violence by raising awareness in the community, getting people to come forward for help, and then connecting them with the resources that they needed. And that's still the heart of our organization. But over the 23 years now that we've been in existence, I would say we probably devote 80% of our time and resources to prevention. Because we just really feel that if you can prevent this problem from happening in the first place, that's the best way to go. But we do work directly with victims. We have a support group that meets here in Melrose once a week. We work with many other agencies to help people find resources for their children, financial help, housing, legal help, whatever they need. That's sort of our goal, is to help them assess what they need and then help them link to the appropriate services. The prevention piece, again, we in the past have mainly focused on teenagers, middle school and high school. And we have just been very, very fortunate to receive a federal grant a couple years ago that allowed us to go even younger to the elementary level. And again, as Kelly was saying, there's so many ways to plug into this cycle and intervene and make a difference. And we really feel like young children who are witnessing domestic violence are at very high risk for repeating that cycle, whether as victims or as offenders. So if you can intervene at that young age, obviously our goal is to stop the domestic violence, but even if you can't do that, by being a caring adult that sort of counters the messages that they're receiving, by being someone that they can talk to, who supports their strengths, you can mitigate a lot of the damage of domestic violence. But we obviously are also working with the parents and supporting them, the non-offending parent. So that's something new for us. We're just really in the second year now of that program. We have 2 counselors at the elementary level, and they cover all the schools. I don't know, should I get into all the programs now, or wait till we get into that question?
We can probably hold it, that's fine.
Okay, so I won't go into detail, but maybe the questions will come up later. I'll talk a little bit more about what we do at the middle school.
That sounds great. Yeah, let's do that, because as I mentioned in my remarks, I think what Megan does here in Melrose is really a model, and I'd love to, part of my goal here is to see, those best practices spread into other communities as well. And so it'd be great to have some questions and discussion when we get to the Q&A about some of this, getting into more detail about what Megan's doing. All right, next we're going to hear from Dr. Malcolm Astley. Dr. Astley spent 37 years in public education as a teacher, a counselor, an assistant principal, and a principal, working in a number of public schools in the greater Boston area. His daughter, Lauren Dunn Astley, was murdered by her former boyfriend on July 3rd, 2011, at the age of 18. And you can see
hard news that my daughter, Lauren, was beaten, strangled, and slashed to death by her former boyfriend in July of 2011. He is in prison for life without parole, though an automatic appeal is in process. In our lifetimes, at the current rate of 3 to 4 such murders every day in our country, approximately 80,000 more girls and women will similarly lose their lives, about the same number as the American soldiers who died in World War I. 13 more, mainly girls and women, have died in the state of Massachusetts this past year, and about 100 since Lauren's murder 7 years ago. The deaths and lockups will take place in all geographic locations, among all ethnic groups, among all sexual orientations, and among all classes. Unless we change things, countless more girls and women will face damaging experiences of many kinds of harassment, control, and abuse, examples which are finally, amazingly, and wonderfully coming out in our media in the Me Too movement. That does not mean that girls and women are not violent, and we need to address that problem as well, but it's the boys and men who by far take the harm to a much harsher and far too often lethal level. In the still larger picture, we must also take on the even much larger challenge of boys and men's lethal violence against each other. Boys and men at the rate at least 4 times higher than the murder rate of girls and women. When the 19th Amendment was passed just one lifetime ago, a long lifetime, but one lifetime ago, women could not vote. So it was men joining together in leagues of support that made it possible to give women their due right to vote. We need boys and men, especially, to step forward now to stem violence and give safety and justice to both boys and girls, women and men, and support the right to freedom from violence. We need to get that on the list of rights and work toward it. I add that I think the vast majority of boys and men find the violence against girls and women and against other boys and men to be disgusting and repulsive, the much larger majority. Even if part of all of us is fascinated with these hard matters. The real challenge is in building the capacity of this majority of boys and men to join with girls and women and with the courage to care, and to move from being passive bystanders to being active upstanders in careful, safe ways to prevent violence and to dismantle the parts of our culture that produce this violence. We as a culture have brought so many other forms of injustice and harm to a stop in our country, and therein, in my view, is real hope. We began as a country by standing against monarchy and the practice of selecting leaders based on genes or on gender. We finally prevailed against slavery. We finally, with women and men working together, gave women their overdue right to vote. Later, we struggled toward and succeeded in the honoring of civil rights and the rights of women in the workplace, though we're not finished there. We have finally taken significant steps in support of those with special needs and to protect children from abuse, though we have further to go. The point is, we've made so much progress against harm and injustice in our culture, and we need to just keep moving in that direction. We can take this next important step now to prevent boys and men's violence against girls and women and against other boys and men, and to insist that social emotional skills and violence prevention be taught in our schools right alongside the close cousin of anti-bullying work. And Rebecca Mooney has done an admirable job bringing this into play in Melrose. I agree with James Gilligan that Shame's got 2 books, one called Violence and one called Preventing Violence. I agree with his view, his core concept that shame, or my phrase, over-shame, seems to be at the crux of what much violence is about. Shame being the opposite of self-respect. As Brene Brown poignantly notes, a good one to see on TED Talks, shame being a perception not that I made a mistake, but that I am a mistake. When we see anger, as Marshall Rosenberg notes, we need to take the time to look under the anger for unmet needs and help discover how that need might be better met. we can create self-love or self-respect or self-worth, and thus the capacity for mutual respect by respecting and loving and concentrating on those skills, starting with our own selves. The alternative is an endless vicious cycle which can be seen among many of the males described in the recent Globe articles on Aaron Hernandez and his tragic shame and violence-filled life. In the cycle, males often isolated and illiterate in terms of their own emotions and how emotions work. They seek self-value or worth through control of both their circumstances and of other people. To lose value or control, then, is to experience painful shame, reflected quickly and often as rage, and then violence to the self or others, as we've seen repeatedly in the mass shootings. There is almost always a foundation of shame, alienation, and rejection. The coin of the land of male worth-seeking and shame avoidance is reflected in a phrase from my own youth, and still used, I think. I can take him, we used to say, meaning I can physically dominate him and thus supposedly gain value myself. We need, I think, as the solution to do a much better job in paying attention to and teaching about the vital matters of how to acquire a higher level of fundamental self-worth and mutual respect, and avoid the harmful, violence-oriented condition of too much shame. Often rampant among males, shame from which they are often fleeing in masquerades of bravado and painful and destructive isolation, as again was true of Aaron Hernandez, despite all his fame. I appreciate so much our chance to have this hopeful discussion here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hassey, for your powerful and eloquent words. Our final panelist is Mark Bergeron-Neighbor, who's been working in this field for more than 20 years. Mark is the Prevention Education Director within the Sexual and Domestic Violence Prevention and Services Division at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. He has presented on issues of sexual assault prevention, teen dating violence prevention, and gender violence issues in general, locally and nationally. Mark is a member of the Massachusetts Legislative Task Force on the Prevention of Child Sexual Abuse, and he works extensively with rape crisis centers in Massachusetts to increase their capacity to plan, evaluate, and improve their sexual violence prevention efforts. Mark is definitely a go-to person for these issues within the Commonwealth, so very pleased to have him with us tonight. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for having me on the panel. I really appreciate my colleagues here. Just a really quick note about public health. So when you go to the doctor, because you injured yourself, you are applying a medical model to something that happened to you. Public health looks at all of the things that are happening to all of
Emily has great resources, as do some other organizations in the room. So those are definitely recommended to you. So we're going to open it up for discussions and questions. Again, if you prefer to just write something on the index card, I will ask a question. Just pass it to Emily back there. And if you're comfortable, otherwise just asking a question. I think it would be easier if you could come to the microphone. That way everybody will be able to hear you clearly. Again, you could share any feedback with us if you like, questions for any of our panelists. So please, maybe come over and make your way to the microphone. While you do that, I'll just kind of kick things off. I do want to also recognize Mike Zwerko's with us tonight, who's the chair of the Melrose Board of Aldermen. Thank you. Appreciate you being here as well. So maybe I'll also kick off the questions, but again, we want to hear from everybody in the audience tonight. Don't know who to direct this at, so I'll let you decide. But obviously, we're all well aware of the Me Too movement, and that has brought a lot of conversations, around particularly harassment, but also issues of sexual assault, domestic violence, out into the open. Do you see the Me Too movement, as a real turning point, as a watershed moment in these conversations? You've been working in this field with all of you for a long time. Do you feel like this is really, we are at a turning point in terms of discussion, understanding, awareness, and really working to address these issues?
Sure, a bit. So I think that there's a lot of progress made through the Me Too movement and what it's accomplished. I think there's a lot of survivors in the entertainment industry who are relieved, which I think in the past wouldn't have necessarily happened. There was executives and actors who, through misuse of power, lost positions of power, which is as it should be. Additionally, I think that the entertainment industry embraced other industries that were also experiencing sexual harassment and misuse of power, because that's not confined to any one industry, as my colleague said. Those are good things that happened, and I think also embracing women of color and marginalized communities. I think that those are really positive examples of progress that happened due to the Me Too movement. At the same time, I know that there's still a lot of issues with survivors not being believed in other communities. I know that there's still challenges in a lot of faith communities, in the military, in educational settings, in academia, and in other industries. So I think there's still a lot of work to do, especially in terms of getting policies and policy change and how that can have a lasting impact, rather than sort of a moment that people have a lot of social awareness of, but not having to see any lasting change that results from it, other than obviously the impact on the individuals who are now being believed or losing their positions. I think that's incredibly good, and stops at a certain point.
I think it's an excellent sign of progress. And again, another way to gain hope, which we need in the face of these tough and tragic problems. But we need to get better at dissecting the culture and how it's full of small, almost invisible behaviors that elevate certain groups in terms of power and being valued above other groups. Alan Johnson, I think I got the right name, I'll remember by the end. He wrote, among many other helpful books, The Gender Knot, and he points to the matter which we tend to forget about microaggressions and how human interactions are full of small behaviors that elevate some people, give them more importance, and denigrate other people. And it can be in the use of pronouns. That movement is interesting. It's made people incredibly aware, I think, but also self-conscious and uncomfortable at times. But we need to grow comfortable with being uncomfortable if we're going to recognize and break down these small behaviors, eyebrow wiggles, silence, turning away, that elevate certain people and let certain people know they will be listened to and other people who won't. And the more we can do that and do it at a sense of humor, and signals that we're in this together to solve these problems, will survive it. But it's going to take stamina, courage, and persistence.
Thank you.
Hi, I'll be the first. My name's Ruthie Poole, and I live in Malden, and I just really want to thank you all and Dr. Esley to take personal pain like that, to make a difference, to change the world, is just really quite moving and very incredible to me. So thank you.
Thank you, and that's what those involved in the D2 movement are also doing.
Well, and that was when, I came out with my experience. I had talked about my experience with date rape and dating violence, and it was through that gave me courage. I, started tweeting. I had never tweeted. But I also was so happy to hear about, like, the education stuff that you're doing, starting with young kids, because that's beautiful. When I was a young adult, which was a long time ago, I volunteered with the Walden Battered Women's Support Committee. And we used the DPH curriculum, the purple book. I don't know if that's still in a back dusty shelf, but I just really want to thank you. It's very inspiring to me to hear what you're doing here in Melrose. And Malden's a very different community demographically than Melrose, but I'm not familiar with a group like that in Malden, and I'd really like to be a part of that, and it's very inspiring. And thank you, Senator Lewis, for having this forum. I think this topic is so important. So I guess I don't have a question as much as a comment to thank you all, because I've learned a lot in a short time I've been here. So thank you.
I'd just like to point out that the purple book's been revised.
Good, because that was 1985.
Change colors.
And I just want to say.
Thank you, Wendy, and we should continue this conversation, and we hope to have the mayor moment here, because we want, this is one of the ideas of the conversation tonight, is how do we take these ideas that one community is doing, bring them to another. Wakefield Alliance Against Violence, I know the folks from India doing amazing work there as well. So that's definitely one of those. Now tonight, to see those kinds of conversations.
The agency Respond is based in Somerville, but they cover Malden.
And again, it was interesting when you said it's really nice to have a local,
Yeah.
because Respond covers a lot of communities.
Exactly, I
And
know that.
that's much harder
instead of just telling the same people. Because we all know it. People who are doing it don't. And that's what I say. Like, that's why I tell my classroom where it's like, when my teacher cooked today, tomorrow we'll do something heavier, and then the next day I'll teach you how to sew a blanket for your nana for Christmas. Like, you know, like everywhere. It can be easy stuff and then hard stuff. And, like so many things. I don't know.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
just sorry, we're gonna finish up what I said before about we use, like if you were a Melrose High School, you'd be the perfect person to be on our student action board.
I actually wouldn't. I didn't miss my junior and senior year much at all. I like actively avoided going. So people who like do have this kind of potential, like they're scared. Like I avoided teachers heavily. I did not want to talk to them at all.
Well, kids who are interested in
Yeah.
these topics usually really enjoy becoming leaders, and they go in, and just this week, in fact, we're going into what's called the freshman seminar classes. Every freshman has to take, and doing a workshop on healthy relationships and consent. And I really believe that using juniors and seniors with freshmen is the best model because they listen to kids who are a little bit older than them. And like everybody on the panel has been saying, really our ultimate goal is to change the culture. Kind of like, I know Malcolm, you make this analogy a lot of drunk driving. You know, it used to just be, that's what people did, and then there was enough awareness about it, enough education that the culture started to shift, and it wasn't cool. It was not cool to let your friends drive drunk. That's what we want to do with teen dating violence. We want our leaders to model for other kids. It's not cool to take advantage of someone who's been drinking. That's just not cool. It's not cool to be controlling with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your partner. It's not cool to verbally abuse your partner. To just make it not cool, not the thing that's done. And that's our ultimate goal. So we really work a lot with these peer leaders and let them sort of be the messengers. But we also train the staff, and again, when we take the holistic approach. And, you know, there's so much we would love to do, but there's the practical realities too of like, there's so much, only so much we can do with the teachers. The training time with teachers is precious. It's like, you know, 3 days out of the whole year. And the district has its own goals. And so we're always fighting to have time with teachers. So one year we said, okay, well, what else can we do besides education and direct training to involve the faculty? And we came up with the idea of t-shirts that had our message that we had a couple of different years with different messages, but one of them was no abuse, and it was sort of a play on words. It was KNOW, and then the letters NO were a different color, so it was like no abuse and no abuse. And then it had a message on the back too, and we gave them to every teacher, and they wore them on Fridays. And we had, this was a big endeavor, but we had all the peer leaders sign up to deliver them to the teachers. And I said to them, think about something that you've learned, why this issue is important to you, and communicate that to the teacher. And then they also had a handout they gave them. So it was not only, you know, wearing a t-shirt, but it was coming from the students, saying this is important to us, please help us. And so the teachers kind of became the messengers.
just literally see that as a whole other job. You know what I mean? Like a whole other teaching job is someone who's psych trained, who can be there for people and telling them, like, just almost like an education reform, like giving psych students another job instead of just being a therapist. It's stuff like that, you know? That's just what I see, because like, I love like hearing that, because I don't hear the bill like stuff's being drafted. I just see it as a whole other job opportunity almost to fill.
I have a question. First of all, I believe we should have one.
Thank you. Thank you.
You hear a lot about early education, which is awesome. It's huge that you guys can start at the preschool level. It's very important. I'm a huge believer in early education through many aspects of life, so go get them. One thing I want to bring up, though, is the parents' involvement, and especially at a young age. I remember being young and seeing my uncles or aunts who I haven't seen, and oh, come on, go give auntie a kiss or uncle a kiss. And so you were forced to at a young age, and you didn't know them. And so that consent was taken from you. You never had it because you had to. So I think that parents need education too, starting with their young children in preschool, and they need to know that it's okay that their kids, because I didn't force my children, not that it helped. I mean, they were still sexually assaulted. But they have to know that it's okay to say no. And I think that we need to put that out there. And everything has been so positive, and I don't want to be negative, but I would like to know what you feel about punishment. Because people who commit these crimes, my daughter was assaulted, and I went through the courts. She was 5, and he was 14. And it was never conveyed to me until the day of court, which took a year of fighting when we were supposed to go to trial, that he was never gonna, at the most that I could hope for was probation, and that he would put on the registry. He was never gonna even see one moment in a detention center. She suffers from PSD. She's 24 now. She still suffers from it. And he just went on about his life. And that was so wrong. And so much in our society, we see these, men getting off, and they get no jail time or 3 months. The Brock Turners of the world, for an example. And that has to be a part of the conversation too. We have to know. We have to let these young men and women, because women sexually assault too, know that if they do commit these crimes, as much as I agree with, that they're hurting and that's why they do these things, and the shame thing, I could not agree more with you, sir, really. But there's not enough punishment when it does occur. That 14-year-old boy, he didn't even get a slap in the wrist, for Christ's sake, okay? So what did that tell him? What did that show to him? Do you think that he stopped? Because I don't. And that's really all I have to say. But I do love the work that you're doing, and I'd love to be part of it. Thank you.
I think taking on what you're talking about is terribly important. I don't want to minimize at all the need for accountability and consequences. But to solve the problem, we've got to get in there much earlier and upstream, and avoid getting to the place where the abuser did it or family. I'm just so sorry
about it from that perspective, and I know you were talking specifically about the sexual abuse, but with that tool, with it being updated within the law enforcement guidelines, both law enforcement guidelines of sexual assault and domestic violence were updated in 2017. But additionally, those assessment sheets were implemented or embedded into those guidelines, utilized within the training committee for municipal police, and that we're continuing to roll it out because it's kind of like, not necessarily the first steps because people have been doing this work for longer than I've been alive. But I think it's about, building those relationships, those community collaborations, and then being able to, with the assessment sheet, understand the history. And where that sheet originally came from what I understand, is that domestic violence was one of the most dangerous calls for law enforcement to respond to. So that's kind of the original concept of it. But for me, in my direct service provider kind of mindset, it's giving the additional tools to the community and how they respond and support to domestic violence survivors, which I think will essentially roll, to sexual assault survivors, to hopefully hold offenders accountable appropriately. So, and then get the support that both parents and children need moving forward, and whatever that is looks like where we are. So, but I thank you again for sharing.
So approximately 40% of child sexual abuse is perpetrated by other youth and children. And there's a Massachusetts Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Task Force that made recommendations last year to the legislature and the governor around how to address that with youth serving organizations. Is really where we're looking at, and all the recommendations are online through the Children's Trust, Massachusetts Children's Trust, and the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate. And they the two of them chair that task force, and we are looking at rolling out our recommendations for youth serving organizations, how they can best keep children safe. So think of the YMCA's, the YWCA's, the Boys and Girls Clubs, but also the dance studios and the martial arts studios and those sorts of places where we know kids are, baseball fields and soccer fields and so forth. So where are children vulnerable, and how do we make those spaces more protected? So that's something that folks can look at online, and that task force is moving forward to make further recommendations for how to implement that statewide.
Hi, I'm Holly Ardito. I hesitated coming up here because I just have so many thoughts, but I'll try and keep it brief. I guess I'm interested in this topic from two different angles because I graduated high school in 1980. So I kind of think of myself as from the era of, sex and drugs and rock and roll. And now that, with the Me Too movement, I'm realizing what I lived in, and I can say Me Too countless times. I can't even count how many times I was date raped or aggressed upon in other ways. And I'm particularly interested because I have a 12-year-old daughter in 7th grade in the Melrose Public Schools. And, I'm distressed hearing you share because what I see is that the kids in schools now get so much more social emotional support than we did growing up. But I'm hearing that it's still not enough. And I know Maeve has a fabulous mentorship program, and I tried to get her into that. I couldn't, she wasn't selected, but she has a lot of other support. But, I think that's a great start, and we need a lot more of that. And I think what I'm trying to get out of this, and I know it's a loaded question, is what can I do for my daughter to teach her? Because I don't even know where to begin,
Do you want my opinion? As a 20-year-old? No, just talk to her, because no one ever talked to me about sex ever in my life.
Oh,
never.
we talked about it.
No,
so
no one
I don't
ever
know how to
has.
prevent this stuff.
At that age, people are asking for pictures, a bunch of stuff that no one's ever talked to you about. And if you just make a conversation and make it something more comfortable, not something to be so uncomfortable
We're
by.
very open in my house about
Yeah,
that.
no, then that's even a huge step, because making it a comfortable conversation is what helps it do something productive.
I have had the same question. Teenage daughters, so.
Do you know about Parent University on Saturday?
I do, and I have another commitment.
Okay.
Every year I've missed it.
Because we're doing one on talking to children about issues about consent and other, relationship issues. But, there's a lot of resources out there, but I know that, there's value in talking with other parents too. So it's not just a matter of going online and reading, but that is a starting place. There's a lot of information out there. Start Strong is one resource that has, I think, a guidebook for parents. Love is Respect is another great website. There's a lot of information out there, but one thing I always say to parents is just use real life as grist for the mill. Like, you're watching TV together, just talk about, like, hey, do you think that's a healthy relationship or not? Or, what do you think about boundaries in this situation? Like, use anything and everything. Things that are in the news, they're listening to the radio, hey, what about those song lyrics? Like, just use whatever is happening in life. Look for those things as opportunities to talk to your son or daughter about these kinds of issues and to convey your values about them. That would be one piece of advice.
I completely agree. I would also say to, I'm doubling down on what Rebecca said. I think conveying your values and letting your daughter know your expectations for what you want for her relationships, both how she is treated and how she treats her partners and her future partners. Which, how old is your daughter? It doesn't matter. However old she is.
Not interested in dating yet, but it'll come.
Which it sort of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Your dog, everybody's children are going to have relationships.
Yeah.
So it's everybody's job to prepare your children for relationships and to talk to them about what your expectations are from them. Say, this is what you'd want. This is what you'd like them to have in their relationships in the future. And it sort of doesn't matter how old they are, how interested or not interested. And it's sort of, and I mean, it may feel at times that she might not be listening, but she's listening. So just continue to have those conversations and totally what Rebecca said, find those opportunities where you can maximize that, find those opportunities where you can use examples from the media, from TV, movies, watch, like try to consume the media that your children are consuming with them so that you can use examples from the media that they're using. Song lyrics, that's a great Start Strong. In Boston, I created a nutritional guide for songs and movies that they can rate the songs, and kids are really honest about how healthy or unhealthy the songs are that they like. They can be really honest about that, so use those tools. Do it as an exercise. Yeah, commercials. Do you think that's a good, is that good or is it bad? And so really use those to your advantage and have honest conversations with them.
My problem is I can't even understand the lyrics.
Often the youth don't understand them either.
We don't. We mumble along with them. I don't say the words, I mumble with them.
And when you give them a copy of the lyrics
Yeah.
and begin to have them look at those carefully, there's a lot of woking that goes on.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Terrell. I go to Malden High, and I am a senior there, and I'm the Malden Teen Enrichment Center. They want So, a little response to that. My mom has always taught me since I was little that she would bring up songs, bring up commercials. We'd sit there on the news and we'd have a conversation about is this okay? And she did describe everything to me. And so I just got into my first relationship, a serious one, really the only one. But she always communicated to me to sit down and talk to him first before the relationship ever progressed. What my limits were and what I needed, what I wasn't comfortable with, what I was comfortable with, and him being an amazing guy, he did accept all of that. And my mom said that I couldn't really settle for less if he never accepted it, and that wasn't the guy I should be dating. So my mom always taught me that from day one. So that has also helped. And you had talked about culture, changing the culture. So about a few years ago, one of an acquaintance of mine, she had got into a case of sexual assault, and she had she never really laid down the rules with him. It was more just a little makeout session. Things went a little wrong. She didn't like it, and she kind of told him to stop, but she did it in a way. And I had a conversation with my friends and a bunch of other people about it, And they said that one of my guy friends, he sat there and he said like, okay, did she straight up tell him to stop? And I was like, no. She kind of just like said it in like a way, and he goes, well, guys don't switch off easily as girls. And it was kind of like this, oh, like, you know, like, what do you mean by that? So guys were told, like, if a girl tells you to stop, you stop. Now he went on and said that, like, sometimes girls will tease and stuff like that and tell, like, oh, stop it. But, like, they need to be upfront about it. I go, well, sometimes they feel an awkward, like, kind of moment where they can't just be like, all right, you need to stop. Like, some girls aren't strong enough to say that yet. And they get into this position where it gets awkward for them. So, like, with teaching them at a younger age, teaching them that it doesn't have to be the norm to sit there and be like, okay, stop. That what you're doing is making you uncomfortable. It's more like you need to understand the social cues of when to stop, and if they're telling you in a different way, then just stop. So I just wanted to like throw that out there about the culture and like what boys are thinking and what girls are starting to think about that.
Bravo to your mom. Thank you.
Enthusiastic consent. Nothing short of enthusiastic consent for kissing or holding hands or anything. That's where you should start. If you don't have enthusiastic consent, there should be going no further. Also, just really quickly, relationship culture is different from school to school and community to community. So I want to just sort of caution parents that your child and the community that they're growing up with may not talk about relationships the way you do, or the way your peers do, or the way that adults talk about relationships, being a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a partner. Those conversations don't necessarily happen in all communities and in all schools. They may see themselves as not dating, but just spending time or hanging out, or there's all kinds, there's sort of a scale. So don't expect necessarily that people are going to necessarily say that they're in a relationship, so you might have to adapt to the culture of that school. So just sort of put that there.
Thank you very much, by the way, Kathy, and the students from the volunteer and Richard Second.
I'm not Kathy, I'm Chris Murphy. Otherwise, I'm CA.
Yeah.
But that's all right.
What you think, Kathy? Chris, we appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Catherine. I'm a daycare provider, and I work with 2-year-olds. Our oldest is 2.5, our youngest is 6 months. And my mom's been doing it for 23 years now, and it's a home daycare, so I've been around for all of it. And on a lighter note, or a more uplifting note, I guess, I just want to say that I've noticed the culture among parents change a lot. It's, before when the young boys were roughhousing or pulling pigtails or whatever, it was always, oh, well, that's how they play. And now, 2-year-olds are 2-year-olds, and they want to hug and they want to play with each other. But we'll say, you need to stop, no means no. When you tell the parents, like, oh, so-and-so's been having trouble, they say, well, what do we do about this? And, parents, I don't think I have a single parent that says, oh, boys will be boys. And it's nice. And also, any advice dealing with 2-year-olds tackling each other, I appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing that. I just want to add something that's given me a sense of hope too is my daughters are young adults and both married now, and I see how involved their husbands are with the child. They both have babies, and the men are just equal partners in really raising the children, and that's a change in the last 10, 20 years. And it reminds me of a program that I heard about that I
talked about putting it in like elementary schools and middle schools. So I can't even remember the last class in middle school that I had with health because my school budget got cut. So we went from having health like every other day in like elementary school to having health never in middle school. So in high school, at Malden High, they want half a year for your entire 4 years to be of health. And my health teachers are trying to start a curriculum with freshmen should have mandatory health, and then seniors and upperclassmen should have mandatory health. Kind of showing like, this is what you need to know so that way you're prepared for high school, like in the sense of sexual needs and everything. And then senior year, it's kind of like a reflection, like what you do need to go out and about in your life outside of school. So they're trying to implement that. However, like one thing that we do get taught, we never get taught about this thing. So my entire like high school life, I've just been going to seminars like this inside my school, outside my school. That's how I was educated on it. And that's something that I wish I was educated more in school, because things like this do happen in school, and some kids, they don't want to be involved, or they don't feel the need, or there's this like some sort of like stigma about getting involved and stuff like this. So it does like put a setback, I think, on the progress of this movement. And I just wish that like they did teach us this in middle school and elementary school, trying to like say like, hey, like this stuff's gonna happen. You need to know what to do. And I don't think like it needs to be this curriculum. Like I don't think like you need a step-by-step guide to do it. I really don't think that. And I think that it should just be more of like, well, this is gonna be your unit on it. This is what you should know, and every year it should progress. Because I think that throwing it at a kid or throwing it at a like a preteen, that's gonna make them feel awkward, and they're gonna explore things that like, oh, well, let me test the limits. And I do think there are gonna be some like pros and cons of doing this for elementary school kids and middle school kids, because some kids are gonna completely like resent it. Some kids might not. Some kids might get more involved. So that's like one thing that like I have witnessed. I just wanted to like throw that out there a little bit.
I can share some resources with Malden High if they're interested, but what we do at the 8th grade level is we have a program called Healthy Relationships, and it starts with a survivor of teen dating violence coming in and sharing her personal story. And I'm telling you, that is the most compelling part of the whole program. When kids see her and see she's just a normal person, she seems like someone you can be friends with, and hear her story and how it started really well, and we started being controlling and got incredibly abusive. They're shocked. They're shocked that this happened to her. And it just hits home, like it really becomes real to everybody. And then the next 2 sessions, we teach them, well, you know, what were the warning signs? What were the types of abuse? Why did that repeat? What was the cycle of abuse? We use her story. Everything we teach will say, you know, think back, what were some of the controlling behaviors? So they take it a lot more seriously. We used to bring her in like the 2nd or 3rd session, and we realized, no, have her come first, because after that, they take it much more seriously. So she's somebody who would be willing to come in and speak to another school. She's done other schools. Another program that maybe Malden High might be interested in is a program called Escalation, which I know Malcolm Astley has been involved in. That is a program that's completely free. We do it for the seniors, kind of like you were saying, preparing them for college. Because what it is, it's a movie and then a discussion group about the movie. And the movie portrays a relationship in college. So even though we know younger students can benefit from it, we feel like senior year is a really teachable moment going off to college. The movie is about a college relationship. So it's a great program. Like I said, it's free. It's just, you know, it's a one-shot deal, but it's very powerful. And you show the movie, it's 45 minutes, and then you have discussion groups. And the One Love Foundation will come in, they'll train the facilitators, they have this great guide. And, you know, of course, that's really, in a way, the heart of it is the discussions afterwards. But there are a lot of resources out there for programs, and I'd be happy to talk with anybody from Malden to try to help you.
Hey, really quickly, I was sitting and I was thinking, I'm Adam, I'm from Malden. I think this is fantastic because there's a lot of communication that I think should and could happen between the communities about what goes on. But I think, I was a middle school teacher, then I was an administrator in a K-8 building, and now I'm a middle school assistant principal. And I think we're seeing a wave happen where a lot of the things that folks are saying, well, we needed when we were kids, they're getting a little bit more of now. Like our kids now, like in the K-4, getting taught explicitly things like the CASEL competencies. There's social emotional learning curriculum that's out there. It's things that their teachers are being trained in. But it's one of those things where, I was sitting and I was listening to the folks come up and talk, and what dawned on me was there's this whole generation in between, and that's going to be sort of where the work needs to be done. And not that I don't think the work needs to be done in schools, but I think that there is an emphasis there. But I think, it was startling to me when I first went to a K-8, that people will still use, well, he hit me on the playground. Well, when he hits you, it might mean that he likes you. And it's like, no, it means that he doesn't respect you. And you need to hear that, as a second grader. And they're not doing that. And I think it's because there are folks who are, 18 to 30 who are gonna be the folks who are working with our kids that aren't hearing these messages that now our kids are getting and now that we're having in these types of conversations. So I think I kind of just wanted to get up and say thank you, but there are things that are out there, like the Melrose Alliance Against Violence. I was a mentor way back when, and I loved every minute of it. It was a big part of, I think, what helped me develop my skills working with kids. But I think those types of programs and the communication between the communities, the Malden, the Medford, Melrose, are what's going to be the most helpful. Making sure that the folks, the in-betweeners who are already out of school, now that this is being taught in school and they missed it, how are we going to catch them? I think that's going to be a challenge moving forward that we're all ready to work on with you.
Thank you, Adam.
I would say it's definitely a partnership between schools and communities and not just on schools. I think Melrose is a good example of that. And I don't think that the solution is only, just as somebody spoke up about parents, parents have to be part of the solution, schools have to be part of the solution, communities have to be part of the solution. There's not just one place where that's where it's all going to happen. And definitely, as Malcolm pointed out earlier, places where men socialize and socialize each other and socialize boys on how to be really humanity for them. So, thank you.
I just want to say one thing about, I think it needs to be a community approach because I think every community is different. I think Malden is much different than Melrose. I think those are the things that need to be looked at. And did you say you're doing some type of is it going to be a social media campaign or a TV campaign or what kind of campaign is it?
So it's in the very early stages. Very early stages. So we selected more advertising, and we essentially have been meeting with them. I actually have a weekly call with them, and then we have a monthly kind of small group of experts that we try to kind of get that work from across the Commonwealth.
And they're very good. So
I have experience.
I've actually worked with more advertising before, but there's
Come up a little more to the mic.
there's a guy by the name of Brian Hurd. He was from Northeastern. He was actually a football player. And as everybody knows who's been in the athletic culture, everybody listens to music. It psychs them all up. That's how they get going. He's done a fabulous called Hip Hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes of the male masculine culture. I think if you could tap into some of those resources, especially for communities of color, I think it would be a valuable resource. He touches on male masculinity and the mixed messages that he sends. I think that would be something really interesting to look at. And, he's done a whole series on it. He's won awards at film festivals for it. It's probably about 10 years old, but it's still relevant. And we might not know the words to the hip hop music, but they all know it. So, in some of it, you have the hashtag #MeToo movement, but then you have the derogatory music and lyrics that some kids that listen to that, and we all know our kids are bombarded by social media 24/7. So, that can put a spin on it. But I just think it would be great if you just looked it up and researched it. It would be well worth it.
Yeah,
so.
no, I appreciate it. It's just beginning stages, and I've never worked with more before. This is my first ever statewide campaign, as you can imagine. And so what we want to do is ensure
mean, you could watch his video, it's not very long, but it is a powerful
What's his name?
image. Brian Hurd, he's from Northeastern. It's called, what is it? Is it Hurd? It's H-U-R-D.
He has a newer.
Oh, does he have a new one? But did you watch the old one? It's very powerful. I show it to a lot of, I've worked with teenage girls for about the last 15, 16 years, all high school. I truly believe prevention is key, but sometimes when you get at that age, the prevention is sort of kind of gone by the wayside, and we're dealing with the fall back with what's never happened. So I think it's a powerful thing to show them, and it turns the age of respect, like, you know, as you need to be respected, and if you're going through something like that, you're not being respected. But it's great because it's from a male's point of view of how distorted it can be. So it's worth a watch.
I appreciate it, thank you.
And Chris, I'm part of that group as well.
Okay.
It helped me, so happy to connect, and
I'd be happy to
share some
just
more
reach
with
out to
us,
me.
and I'll feed it into the,
Yeah,
because it's
that'd be great.
the timing's good because it's still early stage
Yes.
in
Yeah.
development, and more, the firm that's doing this is also did the State Without Stigma campaign to try to dealing with the opioid epidemic as well, so they have some good experience.
I just have one thing and then I just gotta go. My little sister's home alone. People have been saying, like, talking about this is not a school issue and that a community issue, and as someone who's been assaulted by 2 people from different communities, I don't like that because you're saying basically that in a different community, my assault would mean more or less. And in the one I'm in now, it's not the same. So saying that I'm from Wakefield and that it's not as bad from being from Boston is just stupid.
I don't think that's what we're saying.
No, I know. I
It's
just
just that the issues are different.
I just say definitely different, but there are kids in Wakefield who wish they lived in Boston and wish they were hood. Like, it's just a fact. Like, I don't like saying it as being a white person, but there's kids and senior boys who literally genuinely wish they lived in Boston. And it's ridiculous, and I don't, so saying it's a community thing is just not the best approach, because just because you live in a specific community doesn't mean you are that. Like, I could live here all my life and then say one day I want to go live in the South and start, like, you know, and just love that culture and that community. It's not a community thing because you could be in any community and get assaulted. But the first place that you can change things and just be like, this is facts, because we have curriculums now, core curriculums that are being sent to everyone in every community, and that's how you can educate people on that. But for sexual assault, it has to be different where you live. That doesn't really make sense to me. That's it.
So it's both, it's a school community and a community.
Yeah, it just shouldn't be
School
different.
and community solution. It will look different depending upon the community.
I just know there's a book called Pearson that I've been taught English, and it went to every school, bunch of schools, and that's how they taught English as a broad thing, as like a straightforward thing. I just think changing it up for different people is just giving people different treatments. But I gotta go home.
Thank you. All right. And we have time for one more. So, go ahead. Bring us on.
Hi, I'm Aja. Well, what was I gonna say? There's so much that just happened. So I wanted to touch base on the fact that social media has a huge impact on all of this. And the lady, the 12-year-old actually left, but when you have teenagers, like, I remember when I was 12, I had Snapchat, Instagram, everything, and social media was our lives, and it still is, obviously. It's even getting bigger. So I know that at even like 12 years old, people were asking to send naked pictures all the time, and people still get asked, and people still get sent them all the time, and that's something that's harassing people's feelings and everything. It's just not, that's one thing that needs to be reminded. Like, everyone, I feel like, needs to be talked about social media, because everything happens on social media. Everything starts with social media a lot of times, and people meet people from different places, and that's not okay all the time. And I feel like social media, like, even little kids are watching things on YouTube. Like, my little sister, she's 1. She's 1, and she already knows how to, like, work YouTube. And social media, like, she could accidentally click something that's like one of the songs that we listen to and repeat those words. And that's already starting her at a young age. So I feel like that's one thing that what people go on for social media and how they use it.
Great point. Great point.
I
Last final comment?
I was just going to say that the awareness campaign is trying to take into account what the last speaker was talking about to make sure the media are used well.
I'm going to say that we're going to qualify, I think what, I'm sorry that woman had to leave, but prevention will look different from community to community and school to school, but the essential elements need to be the same. It just will have a different flavor depending upon what the needs are of that school and who's in that school or who's in that community. So I think the essential elements are necessary across schools, so I don't want to misrepresent that, but I would also think it could look different.
Well, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. This has been an amazing discussion. You know, these are some challenging topics to put yourself out there to talk about, so we really appreciate it, particularly our young people. And our fantastic panelists, you're all very busy and taking time away from your personal life to be with us. We really appreciate it. So a round of applause to everyone.